Right, in that case, let us get started. It is 6 minutes past the hour. My name is Nisha McSweeney. I'm the academic editor of Anatolian Studies, and I am super happy to have with us this evening Dr. Philip Pillhofer. I'm so sorry. Who is a research assistant at the Theological Faculty of the Humboldt University in Berlin. And he is especially important, not only because he's working, has an excellent, exciting paper on a particularly exciting part of Turkey where my heart is always located, but also because he is the first of our presenters from the newest volume of the journal, which is now available online, hot off the press. Philip's article can now be downloaded from our website on the First View link. So you have to go to the First View link, and it is the first to be showcased in this online virtual seminar series from the Anatolian Studies 2021 volume. So a very, very warm welcome to you, Philip. And I know you're going to get us kicked off on this new seminar series in style. Take it away, it's all yours.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you also for the opportunity to give an online talk as part of the Anatolian Studies virtual seminar series. After a sunny day in Berlin, I am happy to come to London, Ankara, Vienna, or where you all are. I hope everything is working technically. You all can hear me and see my slides. If that's the case, let's go. In recent years, studies on the construction of early Christian memory or collective memory became more and more seminal. This talk is an attempt to analyze the construction of memory in a local martyr text closely bound to a certain region of Asia Minor, the Kallikertnes region. That region is located in southern Turkey. I hope you see my mouse. It's located here. So what will I be presenting you now? After some remarks on this region in general and its Christianization in particular, the martyrdom of Conon is introduced. In the main part, I will closely analyze how this text tightly links time and space to construct what is called a realm of memory. A short conclusion sums up the results. Conon, the most important local saint of the Isaurians, came from the small village of Bidana. Although its precise location is not known, it is understood to have sat on the northern slopes of the rugged Taurus Mountains, not far from the city of Izora, which can be seen here. Nearby the sources of the Göksu, the ancient river Kallikertnes here. In antiquity, the wider region to which Conon's village belonged was called Isauria or Rough Cilicia, one of the last parts of Asia Minor to be firmly incorporated into the Roman Empire. Since the names of the Roman provinces of southern Asia Minor changed frequently, it is better to avoid confusion and to refer to the locality as the Kallikertnes region because the river name remained the same throughout antiquity. You may have heard of the region's inhabitants. They were reputed to be fierce and rebellious, a theme to which I shall return. We are comparatively well informed about the early Christianization of Asia Minor by sources which begin with the letters of Paul and the Acts of the Apostles and continue with many literary sources, inscriptions, and archaeological remains. As this is old hat to most of you, I will not have to go into detail here. Christianity reached the Kallikertnes region rather early. Paul most likely visited its cities, including the Colonia Ninica Claudiopolis, and founded the first communities. He stayed several years in Cilicia during his earliest time as Christian missionary, and Acts refers to brothers in Cilicia. Archaeological remains, including several temple churches, attest the long-lasting process of Christianization. The best known example is what you see here, the venerable temple of Zeus Olbios in Diocaesarea, which was transformed into a church with a baptistry. Local martyrs played a central role in this process. Local martyr cults, widely attested in Asia Minor, are one of the key elements in understanding the processes of religious transformation and Christianization. On this map, only locations that do attest to at least one local martyr are charted. The saints were local heroes. Their cults were maintained for long periods at or close to older pagan cult sites, and they often took over aspects of pagan rituals. These saints were crucial pillars for the newly established Christian societies. There is rich source material, especially from archaeology and epigraphy. The latter is now collected in the comprehensive catalogue by Pavel Nowakovsky, who is here. Hi, Pavel. The Kalykotnos region is exceptional in possessing a denser distribution of local martyr cults than any other rural area in Asia Minor. Only the large cities present a denser concentration of martyr cults. No other territory of comparable size in Asia Minor attests as many local martyr cults over the area as a whole. The fact that the evidence for these martyr cults from the Kalykotnos region is restricted to one or at the most two different places clearly shows that their cults were local and embedded in the consciousness of contemporary congregations. But being local does not depreciate these saints. It meant being there for the local people. These local martyrs were central figures in the construction of local Christian identities. Unquestionably, all these congregations were linked to Christianity all around the Mediterranean and its different churches, by their doctrine, the bishops taking part in important synods, etc. But the Christian communities of the Kalykotnos region had local saints, which were, for the most part, familiar only to them. These congregations were proud of their local heroes and compared their powers with those of the neighboring communities, as can be seen in the competition between Isaurian Seleucia and Tarsus regarding their major saints Thecla and Paul. These local martyr cults were of the utmost importance to the local people in late antiquity. The best known martyr from the region is Thecla, famous thanks to the traditions which bound her closely to Paul the Apostle, attested in most detail by the 2nd century Acts of Paul and Thecla. Although Thecla came from Iconion in Lycaonia, the ruins of her martyr shrine, still known as Hagia Thecla, are close to the Isaurian city of Seleucia. Her cult quickly spread over the whole Roman Empire, making her more than a local martyr. The 5th century Vita et Miracula Theclae in the first part retell her acts. The second part contains the fullest late antique collection of her miracles, where she is closely connected to the Hagia Thecla shrine. This church, with her cave below, you see an image here, the city of Seleucia and its surroundings are represented as Thecla's chora or territory. The author of the Vita et Miracula wrote that Christ had appointed Thecla to preach in the territory around Seleucia, just as Peter was sent to Judea or Paul to the Gentiles. This clear-cut territorial definition will be compared to Conan's appointment later on. Conon from Bidana was another local saint of the Kalykotnos region. Bidana, his home village, lay close to the city of Izora in the Taurus Mountains. Izora was for a long period the metropolis of the Isaurians and lies at the northern end of the Kalykotnos region, not far south of Lystra and Iconium. There has been a long-lasting discussion on the exact localization of Hellenistic and early imperial Old and New Izora. Possible modern sites are Zengibar Kalesi, which is here Izora, Aidomush, formerly called Dorla, and Boskir, which is about here. The debate is still not settled. British scholars like Alan Hall and Stephen Mitchell tend to localize Old Izora in Boskir and New Izora at Zengibar. Scholars of the Austrian Academy in Vienna tend to localize Old Izora in Zengibar and New Izora either in Boskir, as Gertrud Lamminger-Pascha does, or in Aidomush, as Klaus Belke and Kurt Tomaschutz do. That devoid is still not settled, as said. For the purpose of this paper, this is a subordinate question, as in imperial times, the sources do not differ between new and old anymore. Obviously, one of the two was of no relevance by that time. The imperial archaeological and epigraphical evidence clearly shows that the city of Izora was located at Zengibar Kalesi. This inscription from Zengibar Kalesi records a tribute to Emperor Marcus Aurelius by the council and the people of Izora, which can be seen here, Izaureon Hebule Kaiodemos. Notably, after the death of the Isaurian Emperor Zeno in the year 491 and the accession of Anastasius, which was followed by an Isaurian war, the panegyrists of Anastasius characterized the people of this remote country as fierce and rebellious in perpetual conflict with the imperial power. From a Roman perspective, the term Isaurian could be used as an insult much earlier already. For several reasons, Conon of Bidana has remained largely unknown. One of these is that there are several other martyrs from Asia Minor with the same name, leading to confusion that already began in antiquity between Conon of Bidana, Conon the gardener from Pamphylian Megiddos, and Conon and his like-named son from Iconium. Another reason for Conon's neglect arises from misunderstandings about the long version of his martyrdom. This was not only written in Slavonic, as supposed, for instance, by Brent D. Shaw, but also in Greek, although it has hitherto been published under a misleading title. I have recently completed a new edition of the long version based on the Greek and the Slavonic manuscripts. The composition of Conon's Vita has variously been dated to the reign of Justinian or the reign of Emperor Zeno. In my own hypothesis, the composition took longer and was the work of several authors. Notes on his life, like his chaste marriage or the fact that he died years after his trial and torture, as well as stories about his wonders, were gathered after his death. The first written version of the Vita was probably composed in the second half of the fourth century, when a general literary reflection on the times of persecution commenced. The remark that an unnamed bishop created a church at the place of Conon's house maybe points us to one of the motivations of the composition. The fact that the region Isauria was cut off from the province Isauria and incorporated into the newly created province of Lycaonia in 372 could be another motivation as an attempt to strengthen the local Isaurian identity. Regardless of the refinements of exact dating, it is clear that the text of the long Greek version was composed decades after Conon's death. I now already dove into the details of the text, while many of you probably do not know it at all. So let us step back and take a deeper look into the text first. The Vita alleged that Paul came to Isauria. I only read the translation. In the time of the holy apostles, when the world's herald and apostle passed through the lands of the Gentiles, he came to a region of Isauria, end of quote. As Paul's preaching was obstructed by the Holy Spirit, he decided to move on. Conon was born shortly after this and later took Paul's place as the main missionary in the region. He worked innumerable miracles, 6 of them being told at full length, all allegedly leading to Christian conversion. Thus, his Vita more or less claims that Conon is the apostle of the region around Bidana, i.e. Izora and its surroundings. Although Conon's Vita is not as explicit about it as Tecla's, and Conon is never called apostle, the pretension is nonetheless clear. The telling of the first and most important of Conon's miracles relates how the festival day of the pagan god of Apollo was turned into the day that commemorates Conon's intervention. When the people of Izora gathered to celebrate Apollo's birthday, Conon intervened and caused the statue of Apollo to acclaim the Christian god as higher than Apollo himself. I'm quoting, Then their stone god stretched his hands to the sky in great fear, and with a human voice he uttered and said, God is one, Christ is one, who is proclaimed by you. After this miracle had happened, the whole crowd, consisting of tens of thousands, exclaimed with loud voices, the one God is the God of Conon. The God of Conon prevailed. End of quote. Since then, we are told every year people from all over the region come together here to look back at that great achievement of Conon. Their festivities included a torchlight procession and the frequent calls, the one God is the God of Conon. The God of Conon prevailed. Clive Foss once concluded, this is one of the most vivid descriptions of pilgrimage in any source. End of quote. After the narration of the 6 miracles, a Roman governor called Magnus appears, empowered by the anti-Christian edicts of an unnamed emperor. Magnus travels through the area looking for Christians. After identifying Conon, he brings a charge against him and tries to convince him to curse Christ. When Conon refuses, Magnus orders him to be tortured. The inhabitants of Izora at once take up arms and march in force to Conon's rescue. I'm quoting, when the people of the Izorian metropolis heard that the governor was torturing Saint Conon in Bidana, a large armed crowd formed without delay and rushed against him. End of quote. The governor and his troop took flight before they arrived. After this dauntless intervention, Conon survived the torture and later died peacefully. I'm quoting, after he had lived 2 more years in fine and esteemed old age, he reached the end of his life. End of quote. According to the text, a church was built to commemorate him. As you all now know the main storyline, we shall analyze the interconnection of space and time in Conon's Vita. This is not the place to discuss Pierre Noir's concept of realms of memory in depth. Nonetheless, this is an attempt to show how the text actively tries to constitute what we today would call a realm of memory. Noir defines as follows. If the expression lieu de mémoire must have an official definition, it should be this. A lieu de mémoire is any significant entity, whether material or non-material in nature, which by dint of human will or the work of time has become a symbolic element of the memorial heritage of any community. To apply Noir's concept of to Conon's Vita, I will now analyze the topographical and chronological layers of this text, or in other words, how the human will of the authors of the Vita tries to utilize the commemoration of Conon to deduce a memorial heritage for the Izorian Christian believers. The Vita ties Conon closely to his home region, especially to his home village, Bidana. By focusing on a village, Conon's Vita follows the general trend of the late antique hagiographic literature of Asia Minor. Bidana is mentioned explicitly 9 times. Bidana is where he was born, grew up, married, and lived. He worked his miracles in Bidana and its surroundings. When the Roman governor asked the people of Iconium where he can find and prosecute Christians, they answered Bidana. And this is where Conon was arrested, tried, and tortured. Conon died at Bidana and of course was buried there in the same sarcophagus where he had already buried his mother and his wife. In conclusion, the text states that Conon's house in Bidana was transformed into a church. Although the Vita provides precise details about the location of the village, Bidana has not yet been identified archaeologically. Bidana is depicted as being at the center of a network of places. Roads and distances are mentioned, a bridge over a river, the Taurus Mountains, and more. The region, including Bidana and the city of Izora, is envisaged as a territory under Conon's control. Conon's miracles take place in caves or neighboring mountains. These places are not anonymous, but have names like the cave Kaklimi, the mountain Ligramon, or the spring of madness. Some miracles explain how Conon defended his territory, in Greek perichora or chora, against bandits, robbers, and other invaders. On Conon's command, the demons cultivate crops instead of banditry. This way, the pagan sacred topography is transformed into Conon's territory. Speaking of crops, agriculture seems to be an important factor to the authors. It is told in length how someone steals chickpeas from a field and how Conon disabuses him. The Vita even amplifies how the cattle, sheep, horses, and other animals belonging to his domain were protected against robbery by little labels slung around their necks bearing his name. These protective labels on the animals are not the author's pious invention. An example, probably from Asia Minor, carries a text reading, "These animals belong to the monastery of the holy and prized Maria of the monk Sisennios." These anecdotes have one point in common. They all indicate that the territory was guarded and protected by Conon. The account is organized not only topographically, but in strict chronological order. An event happens, and then the next one, and then the next one. Some examples. Paragraph 1, in the time of the holy apostles. Paragraph 5, after much time. Paragraph 6, when he had grown up. Paragraph 11, not long after. Paragraph 15, he already was advanced in years. Paragraph 69, and after that for a long time. Paragraph 81, after much time. Paragraph 171, after his holy and beautiful departure from life. But in at least 5 passages, the temporal references are extended to connect with the contemporary world of the writer and his readers. The formula used for this connection is either Mechrite Semeron, until today, or Mechritu Nun, until now. In most cases, these episodes are connected to a specific geographical location. By connecting a specific story with a specific location and the reader at the same time, a place for commemoration is created. On a side note, it should be mentioned that this strategy has been in use much earlier, for example, in the works of Pausanias. The account of the most important miracle of Conon concerning the subduing of the old god Apollo, leading, as you will remember, to the shouts, "The one God is the God of Conon, the God of Conon prevailed," then continues. Up to now, they shout out these words when they gather on the glorious day in memory of Saint Conon. Thus, the most important of Conon's deed, located at the cave Kaklimi, was connected to the reader's time. In the same way, we are informed that the people of the region up to the present day were afraid to make light of his name after bandits tried to rob him and were miraculously pushed back. I quote, "But up to our day, the fear of Saint Conon stays in all of that region, and if someone belittles his name, it does not take long until he receives his punishment," end of quote. Again, by linking one of Conon's deeds to the reader's own time, a story about the distant past is made relevant for the audience or readership. My third and last example. During his lifetime, Conon imprisoned evil demons in clay amphoras and buried them under his house. When the house was converted to a church, those amphoras came to light, and after some complications, we read, "They set aside the remaining amphoras in the same place, and they have not been moved to this day." In this case, the story of Conon locking up demons in amphoras was connected to the construction of his church, where they presumably could still be seen. Their visible presence probably gave rise to the whole story. All in all, 4 of Conon's 6 miracles were directly tied to the reader's time. As a whole, the Vita creates several symbolic places in and around Bidana that could be used for the commemoration of Conon and his deeds. Be it the village itself, including his house and grave, the cave Kaklimi playing a major role in the official commemoration, i.e. the torchlight procession, the mountain Ligramon, the spring of madness, or just grazing cattle, a field of chickpeas. To the attentive reader or audience, all these Conan-related spots and things become part of the community's memorial heritage. This embedding of Conan's life makes him a perfect local saint. A survey of other epigraphical, literary, and archaeological evidence from the Callicottnus region shows how Conan's realm of memory was widely accepted and transformed or even expanded by the people of the region. Conan became the patron and protector not only of Izora and its surroundings, but of a much wider region. His commemoration and veneration in the Callicottnus region is attested more densely than Tekla's, even though her cult center was more important beyond the region. Conan's and Tekla's territories were overlapping. Seemingly, this facilitated an environment for cooperation rather than direct competition. A small silver casket from Chirga, probably a nuptial gift, invokes and depicts Conan twice on one side and Tekla on the other. In an imperial law from the late 5th century, it is stated that an unknown place was promoted to the rank of a city in Conan's honor and renamed Leontopolis. That city, which has only recently been promoted to the rank of a city in honor and veneration of the gloriously triumphant martyr Conan, which is the city of the Leontopolitans. End of quote. Up until now, it was assumed that one of the two Izoras became Leontopolis, but this identification is problematic in many ways. In my opinion, Conan's home village, Bidana, was promoted. His rural shrine became the center of a city, similar to what happened in other parts of Asia Minor, for example, in Gamia. Regardless of the identification, it is undeniable that a place in Conan's territory was promoted in his honor by the emperor himself. Churches and other buildings were dedicated to Conan, and individuals set up votive inscriptions to him. Procopius, in his work on the buildings supported by Empress Justinian, mentions a poorhouse and an aqueduct in Korikos dedicated to Conan. The aqueduct at least still exists, running from the Lamos River to Sebaste and Korikos, and the poorhouse is also attested epigraphically. Conan was a local martyr from a village near Izora. His vita makes him, instead of Paul, the apostle of the region. As a local martyr, he represents the Christian version of what was known as a local hero in earlier times and substitutes, or better complements, mythological figures as the eponym hero Cilix, who is already mentioned by Herodotus. In his vita, Conan is memorized as a successful Christian preacher, a potent miracle worker, using his power to give shelter to his flock, both literally and figuratively. By linking Conan's deeds with specific locations and interconnecting these with the reader's time, the text elaborately transforms the region into Conan's hora back then and now, and thus creates a realm of memory. Additionally, by staging Conan as successful successor of Paul, Conan's vita is a bridge for the local people to the canonical writings. It is highly probable that his vita was read, at least partially, in local church services, and that people visited the places of commemoration constructed by his vita. The cult of Conan enjoyed great popularity among Christian believers of the whole Callicottnus region in the South Taurus, and was exported around the Mediterranean Sea as well. You probably all saw the Egyptian ampulla on the poster for this lecture, depicting Conan with one of the discussed clay amphoras. Beside Egypt, Conan's veneration is attested in several further places in Asia Minor, in Constantinople, on Cyprus, in Syria, and in Judea, Palestina. An inscription on the Porta Appia, nowadays called Porta San Sebastiano, probably from the time of Justinian, shows that his cult even made it to the gates of Rome. Thank you very much for your attention.
Fantastic. Thank you very, very much, Philip. Now, I think all of you will be gathering your thoughts, and if you have questions, please do post them in the Q&A box. If you put them into the chat box, there's a chance I may not be able to see them. So save the chat box for the informal chatter, as it were, and the clapping. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, Brendan. And I'm clapping too for you, Philip. That was definitely getting us off to a really great start with this next seminar series. While you are thinking and typing in your questions to the Q&A box, I have some questions inevitably of my own that I have been saving up for the last few months. So Philip, are you ready? First of
Yes.
all, I've got one question which is very specific to the martyr cults of this region, and one which is much more general about the martyr cults and how they work more widely. So the specific one first. There seems to be in this region interest in subterranean, and it really struck me when you talked about burying the demons in Amphorae under your house, which is, it's not where I would bury demons, under my house in Amphorae if I had the choice. But then, of course, you know, Aya Thekla is this underground church shrine in the Vita as well. The cave of Apollo as well seems to have the subterranean quality to it. Is it just martyr cults associated with this region which have this obsession with the underground, or is it something which we see elsewhere?
Well, I think the first point is that you can also see that for the pagan cults of that region, so even Athena has been venerated in caves there. So there's some continuation from pagan times in this regard. And there has been theories that, for example, the cave of Thekla has been a pagan cult cave before. I do not think that in that case, but there are definitely several caves where you can see that Athena was venerated. And yes, and it also happens in other regions that Christian saints are venerated in caves. I guess this probably has to do with the landscape and that in the Taurus you just have many caves, and so people started venerating their saints or gods there.
So it's a little bit convenient. I think that's interesting about the continuity there as well with the cult. And there's the spectacular, the caves of heaven and hell as well that we have in the area as well. That's so cool. Anyway, so that's the specific question. My more general question is, what you seem to have here in the Vita is a telescoping or a collapsing of time, that things are, you know, there's continuity from the time of Conon until Nun, until today, until the present time. Which interesting, the collapsing of time, but at the same time there is a mapping of geographic space. That the naming of geographic locations is quite specific as you move through. And I wondered if you felt there's any parallels or inspiration drawn from earlier kind of periegesis or periplus literature, which kind of maps space through narrative.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I in my talk I named Pausanias, who travels through Greece and often describes what he sees and says this is still existing and it's so old already. So there is, it's no Christian idea to do it like this. But this text does it a lot more than other hagiographic texts, for example. And often you have hagiographic texts that do not have such a great interest in all these local names, and they tend to be more well, not go into the detail, and it's more about the story and the wonder, and not where and when it happened. So in this case, it was just interesting to see that the focus is set so much on these geographical details.
Absolutely. Do you think that there's any chance of the Vita mapping out movement, either processional movement or festival movement or pilgrimage type movement, that you might observe some kind of relationship to Conon, or observe something in the cult by moving around the landscape in an analogous way.
Certainly, yeah. It starts with the fact that there are, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 times where it is said that people come down from Izora to Bidana. So there's a route, and it's pronounced that people are wandering there. And the other thing is with the first miracle and the cave, Kaklimi and the god Apollo, the most part of the story is not in the cave, but before they are there, as Conan stops the people in Izora and says, why do you want to go there and venerate this pagan god, believe in Jesus? And they then agree on like who's first there can decide what we do. And so there's a lot going on, and description how they go there and how Conan makes it first there and stuff like that. So the movement in this geographical space is well, it's a big part of the text. And so I guess it might have to do with later procession routes, as the text says they do this torchlight procession from his house or to his house. I do not remember at the moment, but the procession definitely has its way there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to, you have this parallelism of maybe ritual practice and textual inscription, as it were, in the text. That is super interesting. We did have a hand raised earlier, I think, but somebody has now put down their hand. Belgium, if you, oh yes, we have a hand raised. Oh no, it's gone down. I'm very confused. We've got hands being raised and being put down. I would encourage you to type into the question and answer box. It's just a little bit easier. That way we can, it's very difficult to mute and unmute you from here. So it's much easier if you type into the Q&A box. So this is a great slide to finish with, Philip, that you've, as you said, right to the very, very gates of Rome. I mean, how do you think somebody in Rome understands Conon, someone, a martyr who is so embedded in the landscape of a local region? And we talk about globalization and the different scales, but how does this work? How does this make sense in Rome?
Well, there are several layers to this question. The first thing is from the perspective of a Roman reader who knows hagiography from Asia Minor, it's not clear which Conon is meant here, so it could be any of them. Then how does that Greek inscription come to Rome? Probably it came in the time of Justinian, when troops from Asia Minor repaired that gate, and probably it were Isaurian troops who brought it there. So this might make clear how the cult came there. And the third layer is what did the Romans think? And in later Latin hagiographic text, we do have suddenly some Saint Conon from Rome. So probably they made up another saint, or they had a legend explaining how this name comes here. Or this is at least what I make out of it. There are several other ways to explain these. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And some suggestion has come in from Anna Koller, who says it's quite striking to see the inscription above the Porta Appia in Rome. This is a real location of visibility. Does it relate to communities of Cilicians at all? Do you think?
No idea. Well, it's the photo you see here is not directly in front of it, well, because there are the cars, but you also see here that there's another building. It's an old Roman ark. So if you go out there, you do not see this inscription so far, as you have to go to that other ark before, but then obviously you see it when you go out there. And well, it's a gate in the south of Rome. If you want to go by foot, that's the way way to Cilicia, but well.
That would be quite a long way to go. Quite a long way to go. Can I ask you about the location of Bidana then? This mysterious
Yeah,
question.
I will try to find a map. Yeah, right. Well, so this is Izora. We have it enlarged here, and there are two circles around it. This is just as the text notes. I think it's 18 stadia, so some kilometers from Izora. This is why I added the circle there. There somewhere must Bidana lie if the text is correct. But we do not have further info, and to my knowledge, there has been no, well, no archaeological survey to look for Bidana in that region. There are so many archaeological sites there that are not identified. So it is definitely possible that there was something, and if it's just a village and some churches, it might be just invisible today.
I think it's wonderful that this is it's a text which is so concerned with geographical specificity, and at the core of this text there is a lost city or a lost settlement. I just there's almost a kind of a cosmic irony in that. We have a question from George Lemos, who asks, does the hagiographic literature reveal any awareness of specific pre-Christian associations of mythological figures in space, such as the giant Typhos, who was supposedly, according to Pindar, based here as well, now in Tartarus, belching from Etna, nurtured in a Cilician cave, sometimes linked with the Hittite Ilyanka as well. So is there any sense of that in the text?
Well, there is Apollo who is mentioned, and his cave, and all other pagan gods or whatever he exercises are just unnamed demons. He does never there are no other names than Apollo. So no, or at least not identifiable. There's another demon from a cave that is exercised by him. But we do not know if that demon had a name in antiquity or not. From the clay amphoras, when the church is built out of his house, the builders open one of these amphoras, and the demons come out, and they do have names, but it's one is Diomedes, and the other one I just forgot. Let me check.
That's an interesting kind of Homeric name for a demon to have. I wonder.
Ah, yeah, right. One is Diomedes with an Homeric name, and the other one is Cutunios. So it's an indigenous name from the region. But Typhon is not mentioned, and well, I think the Korykian cave is too far away for him. It's not well in his view. While the second line here, which is the cave Kaklimi, crosses the Kalykotnos, and in that area there's a part where the Göksu actually is underground. So this could be a connection, but I'm not. Well, we do not have further information on that. It's just a hypothesis.
Interesting. Pavel asks whether the inscription or the cult of Conon might have come to Rome via Jerusalem. If his cult was brought to the Holy Land with pilgrims, it could travel from there to Rome. Does this make sense to you?
Well, it definitely is possible, but I do not know it. There are several several inscriptions and other things that attest to to veneration of a Conon in the region of Jerusalem, Judea, but I do not know the chronological order in which this appears, or it's not that I do not know it. There's no hard evidence on that.
That might be. I imagine if the evidence is not very, there's not a lot of it either. It might be a few limited inscriptions, but I wonder. It's a thought. Brendan Oswald has asked if you spoke about Conon as a perfect local saint, if he says he's remembered you correctly.
He does.
Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by perfect? In what way is he perfect?
Okay, well, that was just playing with all these geographical details, and that he's tightly linked to the region and the people there. He's actually not speaking Greek but Isaurian, so he is painted as the perfect local saint, as we see. It works also outside of Isauria, as he's later venerated outside of Isauria as well. So this perfect is maybe should not interpret it too far.
Okay, it was a lovely description for sure. We have a comment from Hugh Elton who says there's a late 7th century pope called Conon as well, just to add to our whole spectrum of Conons that we have. That's interesting. You wonder why that name is chosen.
Well, there are several bishops and from the region and abroad also with that name. I actually do not know why the Pope is called Conon. Maybe it's about the connection with the local Roman cult on Conon. I do not know if he has connections to Isauria at all. The name for a male Conon has been chosen very often already before Conon, the martyr in that region. That's probably the cause why we have several martyrs with that name, as Conon is typical to that region. And later on, it's just a normal Christian name. It's, I think, in Rough Cilicia, Conon is after names like Paul and maybe George, the third most used name for a male in that region.
That's really interesting. The onomastic patterns are interesting as well. I wonder when that comes into play, when Conon becomes a really popular name. And
well, it's before Christian times already. It's
okay.
It's most likely, or that's my hypothesis, or not only my, but it's most likely some kind of indigenous name who just sounds like the old Greek name, as we have the old Greek name Conon, which has been used 500 BC already, but it's used very seldom. And in that region, in the early imperial times, you do have many, many Conons, not only in Rough Cilicia, but also in Pamphylia, Pisidia. There you have many inscriptions attesting to that name. And in early Byzantine times, it's, well, as I said, the third most name in that region. So I guess the Christian saints with that name made it even more attractive to people from that region, as the name combined the local identity and the Christian part of the identity.
It's interesting. He almost comes to stand for the territory itself. Then, if his name is so popular, he could be almost any guy, any local Conon. Right? You know, you have 5 Conons in your village. He just becomes part of. He makes it, roots him even more strongly in the landscape. Kate Clow has asked whether Maltese crosses, such as the one that you showed on the archstone in Rome, is this symbol, is this type of cross used very generally in the area of Isauria?
Well, it's a Greek cross and it is used there, but I don't think it's very typical. I think it's used in at least in all Asia Minor. Apart from that, I do not know, but I guess it's nothing special exactly for that region.
I think actually the question might be when does this become known as a Maltese cross? Now I think we might think of it as similar to a Maltese cross because of the Knights of St. John, but I wonder if that is chronologically later. So I wonder how
sorry,
this
I did not get
the
the Maltese part. Yeah, right. That's probably later.
Yeah, but it's not something that is particular to Isauria. It's a more general
no.
Asia Minor iconographic trait. And Anna has just had a follow-up comment, wondering if there were other inscriptions from Rome mentioning communities of Cilicians, but I suppose that's another bit of research.
Oh, well, yeah, I'd say most likely, but I do not know.
Fair enough. It's not the focus. We have been from Rome to Jerusalem via Malta, just about. But I do think we need to come back to Cilicia, because this is who Conon is, very much so, more than, you know, almost other saints, that he is absolutely rooted in Cilicia. Why, if you've got such strong traditions of Conon on one side and Tekla on the other, and they're really, really strong traditions, why do we have so many other local martyr saints as well? Why, you know, what is it about the Cilicians that they really want lots of martyr saints?
Well, let me look for the map. It should be somewhere. No, it should be here. Yeah, well, as you see, it's not only in that region, it's very dense in that region, but it's in all Asia Minor that we do have many local saints. And from my point of view, it's just that the veneration of local saints started during the period of persecution. So every village, every city had its own martyrs, or not every, but most had their own martyrs and venerated them, and some got more prominent and were venerated in other cities later on as well. So it's not like we do have Conon now, let's invent another one. It's more like we do already have our, in Xenonopolis, for example, Socrates, and we later on venerate Conon as well, but we still have our church, and in Xenonopolis also Aqueduct of Socrates, for example.
That's interesting. I do wonder as well whether it ties into, as you suggested earlier, these pre-existing, pre-Christian local cults and local traditions. If you have these very strong pre-existing traditions of cults based in and of the landscape, then maybe it's more likely just to translate into a Christian martyr cult at that stage. Fabulous. We do have another question. I'm sorry, Kate, I'm sorry to miss your question. Since Conon was an organizer, does the hagiography give Conon any specific title indicating that he had an official position within the early church?
Not at all. He's not even called apostle, he's just called holy martyr. And that's all. And that's also, well, interesting, as actually he is not a martyr, as he did not die in torture or his trial. So actually he's only a confessor, as he was not martyred, or he did not die while being tortured. So no, there are no further titles.
That's true. I love this martyr cult for somebody who is not a martyr. Fabulous.
But that happens often. And Tekla, for example, actually did not die. She just dove underground and lives in her cave unseen by the other people. So she does not die too.
These very strange Cilician non-martyrs. They're wonderful. Lots of them. I think that this is probably a good place to draw ourselves to a close, especially since we're getting close to the hour now. We're in fact coming right on the hour. For anyone who joined us a little bit late on YouTube, thank you for your patience. The full lecture will be uploaded onto YouTube very soon, so you can catch the beginning bit that you missed. And apologies to you for us not quite getting the technology to work for us as we had hoped. For everyone else, thank you very much for giving us your attention, your questions, your cheerful comments over the last hour, and for getting this most recent session of the Anatolian Studies seminar series off to such a brilliant start. We have had the very, very local. We've had the absolutely global of the period. We've had we range fairly wide, but I think the story of Conon is one that I think it does encourage us to come back to the very specifics of the landscape and give us a real sense of place. And I liked the idea of collapsing time from then to us now, from Conon until the present day. Thank you all very much. We hope to see you next month. Please look at our website for the list of seminars which are coming up over the next few months. We will be running for the next few months and then having a brief break over summer. Thank you all very much and see you soon. Goodbye, everybody.